This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Frank and Teresa Wilson were married for 34 happy years. Then in 1960, Frank's death separated them forever, or so it seemed, until Teresa's 80th birthday approached. Many in the Wilson family believe that Frank's spirit chose that occasion to make a special visit from beyond the grave. To his neighbors in Ohio, Neil Gott seemed perfectly ordinary, the proverbial nice guy next door. Then an FBI raid revealed that Gott was running a $1 million drug operation. Perhaps you can help find him. When he was 19 years old, Kurt Borton was declared missing in action in Vietnam. Today, his name is inscribed on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. But incredibly, Kurt's family believes that Kurt is not only still alive, but that he has returned to the United States with a new identity. While the Army maintains that Kurt is dead, his family has accumulated just enough evidence to sustain their hopes that they'll yet find their son. Join me for this intriguing edition of Unsolved Mysteries. Most of us have a certain image of big-time criminals. They wear three-piece suits, slick back their hair, drive fancy cars, and wear fancy jewelry. That's the image we see in the movies and on television. In real life, a criminal can be anyone, even your next-door neighbor. Neil Gott certainly seemed normal enough. He and his wife, Terry, had moved to the small town of North Benton, Ohio in 1986. Neil opened an auto repair shop, and business appeared to be thriving. When a baby girl came along in 1989, the happy family picture was complete.
The Gotts on the surface appeared to be a very legitimate couple. He was a mechanic who had a place called Lake Park Auto. She had a cleaning business where she cleaned houses. They had a 2-year-old daughter, Heather Gott, who was a very attractive blonde-headed little girl, and everything appeared to be normal, unless you lived in the community and had heard some of the rumors, or unless you were an FBI agent and you knew, you had access to what we knew.
Hey, what are you doing?
Just talking on the phone.
Hey, this is
What
Neil
the
Gott.
FBI knew was that Neil Gott was making an awful lot of phone calls to a drug dealer in Akron.
I'll bring that thing of mine too at the same time. Maybe we can just flip around, you know what I mean?
Probably.
The FBI listened in for a month, gathering information and biding their time. Finally, on December 15th, 1990, Gott put in a substantial order for the next day, 8 ounces of cocaine.
Probably bring 8 or so.
8 of them?
Yeah, give me an 8-pack.
No kidding.
When Neil Gott made the buy, the FBI was waiting.
FBI, don't move. Step back away from the vehicle. Come on, step aside. Put your hands on the truck. We're with the FBI. Do you have any weapons on you anywhere?
No.
Okay, go ahead and turn around.
The agents did not take Neil Gott into custody. They had decided on a risky strategy.
We wanted the cocaine, but we were not going to arrest Neil Gott because we wanted to continue our investigation till we got everybody in his network.
Maybe we can just
Neil Gott, the good neighbor, did not disappoint. He went straight home and called his buyers to tell them the bad news. There would be no cocaine. Now the FBI had the names of Gott's cohorts. But the authorities had already begun to suspect that Gott was more than a small-time cocaine middleman.
we became suspicious of other areas of Neil Gott's activities. For instance, he had rented a barn in Homeworth, Ohio, and in this barn, which was supposedly empty or being used for occasional auto repairs, we looked at electric bills in the neighborhood of $1,800 to $1,900 a month.
Whereas in that type of building, the electric bill shouldn't be over $50, and that was our clue that they were probably growing marijuana hydroponically in that property.
The FBI moved again. This time they carried a federal search warrant for Neil and Terry Gott's house and for their barn.
His indoor growing operation was everything we expected and much more. It was a very sophisticated operation with expensive strobe lights, which are heating lamps, expensive timers, irrigation piping and tubing to all these various plants, grow packs, everything a successful marijuana operation for an indoor growth needed, Neil Gott had. Inside, with that kind of secrecy, in normal cases, you can harvest at a minimum 4 times a year. Your minimum harvest would be in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $100,000.
In addition to the marijuana, agents also found a trove of weapons when they searched the house, including high-powered rifles, handguns, and explosives. Terry Gott was at the barn, but she denied any knowledge of drug dealing. This time, however, Neil Gott was arrested.
After he was arrested, Mr. Gott's bail was set at $25,000 cash and a $200,000 bond, which was signed by his parents. And he immediately, of course, made bail and was back out on the street.
In the meantime, the FBI had nailed Gott's entire distribution network, as well as several other drug dealers. In all, 22 people were indicted on March 7, 1991, including Neil and Terry Gott. Most of the defendants were in court for the arraignment. The Gotts never showed. When the FBI went to the Gotts' house, it was empty. In the backyard, they found a dead dog chained to a tree. The only sign of life was a neighbor who wandered over to see what was going on.
Brian Smith, FBI.
Oh, have you seen Neil or Terry Gott? No, I'm watching their dog.
You're watching their dog?
Yeah.
For how long?
I don't know, about a week.
When was the last time you saw?
We started interviewing people, and we interviewed a lady who had rented a U-Haul trailer for the Gotts, had put it in her name. And we were also able to decide, and from talking to people, that on the evening of March 6th, the Gotts had loaded all their personal belongings into this U-Haul trailer and had left. Neil Gott ended up in Florida. At least that's where he dropped the U-Haul truck. We believe the Gotts are still in the United States. Neil Gott is a powerboat enthusiast, the kind of cigarette-type boats that were on Miami Vice. He enjoys that kind of activity. So we feel wherever he is, he's probably engaging in that. He's a truck driver, and he's also an accomplished mechanic. But what Neil Gott does best is he grows dope, marijuana specifically, so we definitely feel he's engaged in that activity.
Neil Gott is 44 years old, 6 feet tall, and weighs 180 pounds. He has prematurely gray hair, which he may have dyed brown, and blue eyes. Gott sometimes uses the alias John Hughes and should be considered armed and dangerous. When we return, the poignant ghost story of a love that transcended the grave. It has long been said that love conquers all. Consider the romance of Frank and Teresa Wilson, joined in marriage 1926, separated by Frank's death 1960. Incredibly, Teresa and her family believe that Frank has expressed his continuing love and devotion from beyond the grave.
I can't believe it's been 34 years. 34 years married and 34 years he's gone. I have a feeling that he's here all the time, around me. I really do.
The 1930s and 40s were busy years for Teresa and Frank as they raised 7 children, 3 girls and 4 boys. Money was scarce, but the Wilsons were content with the simple joys of marriage and family. A red letter day was April 3, 1950, Frank's 50th birthday. Teresa proudly presented him with the money she had carefully saved to buy their first TV set.
Frank?
The last time I saw Frank, we got up at our usual time, 6 o'clock, and went to the door, like I always did, to kiss him goodbye.
Surprise me.
All right.
Goodbye, sweetheart.
And that was his last words when he said, "Goodbye, sweetheart."
Frank Fay Wilson, beloved husband and father of 7, died of a heart attack on his way to work. He was 59 years old. Teresa's family, which eventually grew to include more than 24 grandchildren and 40 great-grandchildren, helped to fill the painful void left by Frank's death. In 1982, as Teresa approached her 80th birthday, her children planned a special celebration. They never imagined just how special it would turn out to be. More than a year in advance, Teresa's daughter, Margaret Locke, began working on a unique and intimate gift.
I wanted to put together a memory book with letters from all the relatives and the children and grandchildren and people all across the states, just writing her a letter and telling her how they felt about her and remembering things that they had done in the past. And it took a long time, and it was a lot of work, but it was worth it.
According to Margaret, one letter was delivered in the most extraordinary fashion, in the midst of a sleepless night.
I sensed that there was someone in the door, and I looked over, and there was a man standing there, and it just came to me that it was my father. He was white, and it was just, it glowed. It actually glowed. I don't know how else to describe it.
Margaret, I'm here because I want you to take down a letter.
Letter? You mean a letter from Mom's book?
Margaret says she grabbed her journal and hurriedly began to scribble.
Dear Tress, as you celebrate your 80th birthday, I want you to know I'll be at your side as you blow out the candles on your cake. Happy birthday, sweetheart.
When he was done, I looked up at him again, and he smiled, and he was gone. He just vanished. And I just was so stunned. And I laid down, and it took a long time, and I finally fell asleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I thought, what a dream. What a dream I had.
Margaret says she began to believe it wasn't a dream when she read the love letter the next day.
If I were really here, I would shower you with sapphires, as blue as the ocean, to match your eyes.
My father was always like that. I mean, when my mother's regular birthdays came around, he was so, sometimes they didn't have enough money to buy her a gift, but he always had something special for her, and I really think this was the most special thing he had in all her years.
September 19th, 1982. At last, the night of the party had arrived.
It turned out we had quite a few people at the party, and my mother kind of got wind of it before the party. So when she walked in there, I think she kind of suspected what was going on, but she was still so gracious, and she just acted like she was just as surprised and pleased as punch.
Well, when they took me there, it was a hall, and I knew it was going to be a party. And it was my birthday, so I figured that's it.
Teresa had guessed correctly about the party, but she had absolutely no idea what was in store for her as she opened the book of letters.
She opened the first page, and inside was the invitation, which, oh, that's nice. And then she opened it up, and there was a picture of her and my dad that my nephew had drawn, and then there was the letter.
Dear Tress.
I just couldn't control myself. I just started to cry.
Initially, Teresa thought Margaret had written the letter as a way of including Frank in the celebration. But then she began to wonder.
When it said, Dear Tress, everybody else called me Teresa, but he called me Tress.
Happy birthday, sweetheart, Frank.
I think I'll read these later.
I couldn't get past the first page. I was in tears. Then everybody started coming up and congratulating me and giving me presents, and after that it was a real nice evening.
How did you know what he called me?
What do you mean?
Sweetheart.
I didn't. I just wrote what he said.
I couldn't believe it. I said, oh no, it's just a dream. But then when she told me that she never knew about him calling me sweetheart, and she said that's what he signed it, told me to sign it, and then I believed it. But I wish he'd come to me like that.
More than a decade has passed. For Teresa, the letter remains a tangible link to her one true love.
Well, I read his letter and I can just hear him say it just like he was right there.
I love you more as each day brings us closer together. Stay a while, though. I'll wait forever.
I love that part of it. He doesn't want me to leave yet. And I guess my kids don't want me to leave either. But it gave me a good feeling to know that when I go, they shouldn't feel bad because I'll have somebody waiting for me.
Here we go, everybody.
In September of 1994, our cameras were on hand as Teresa Wilson celebrated her 92nd birthday. Gathered around her were family members from 4 generations, and perhaps, just perhaps, the spirit of the man she will always love, her sweetheart, Frank Wilson. Next, a woman claims to have seen her brother more than 25 years after the government declared him missing in action in Vietnam. The images are as stark today as they were in the 1960s and 70s. It seems hard to believe, but it's been more than 20 years since American forces were fighting and dying in the distant jungles of Southeast Asia. Along with the 58,000 who lost their lives, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial also carries the names of hundreds of GIs who were officially unaccounted for. A few families hold on to the faint glimmer of hope that the men will one day return home. Tonight you will meet the family of Robert C. Borton, Jr., known as Kurt. The Bortons believe Kurt's name should never have been inscribed on the wall in the first place, that he is not missing in action, nor was he killed. They are convinced that Kurt is not only still alive, but that he has come back to the United States with a new identity.
I know my brother Kurt's alive. I've seen him on 3 separate occasions in Washington, D.C., and I have not one doubt in my mind that that was my brother, and he's very much alive to this day.
While it's understandable that the Borton family might not want to accept the harsh reality that Kurt has died, they have collected just enough evidence to give credence to their theory. When Kurt enlisted in the Marines, he was 19 years old. 8 months later, just 19 days after arriving in Vietnam, he found himself on night patrol near the city of Da Nang. It was not long after that Robert Borton received the visit that every father dreads.
Yes?
Mr. Robert Borton?
Yes?
I'm Captain Victors. This is Lieutenant Jeffries, Casualty Office, United States Marine Corps.
Is this about Kurt?
Yes, sir. I'm afraid we do have some bad news about your son. He has been reported missing in action.
I don't know what to think. He really hit me hard. They said he's missing in action, so I had hopes they'd find him right away. And listening to the news all the time, hoping something would come up where they'd found him, but never did. Never happened.
2 years passed with not a single word about Kurt's fate. Still, the Bortons prayed for a miracle. And in September of 1968, they believe one was delivered.
Robert?
Yeah?
Come here a minute.
We subscribed to the Leatherneck magazine and the Marine magazine. And I was just going through it, and all of a sudden I see this picture, and it just jumped at me like, there's our son. I wasn't expecting to see a picture of him, but it was him.
And I seen what it said right then, there's my boy. I ain't no doubt about it. It is his picture of him.
The photograph had been taken in the Quang Tri province in 1967, a full year after Kurt had been reported missing. The Bortons are convinced that this soldier is their son.
We took it down to the Marine Casualty Office, and then we got a letter back saying that it couldn't be him because it just didn't match in that and something else. In other words, they claimed it was not our son.
A few years later, the Bortons came across what they believe is additional evidence. This is a frame from a 16mm film shot in a Viet Cong prison camp in 1968. The Bortons have identified this prisoner as Kurt.
I seen that there, and as soon as I seen it, I said, there's my boy again right there.
I'm like him, there's our son again. No doubt. I mean, you know your children when you see them.
Major Dave Greco, a spokesperson for the Marine Corps, says the Bortons are mistaken.
Each of the service members in that photograph have been positively identified. We've spoken to each one of them, and none of them is Robert Borton.
If it had ended with the 2 photographs, Kurt's family might have dropped the entire matter. But the Bortons say there is more, much more. In the summer of 1976, Robert says he was approached by 2 strangers who claimed to be agents with the Department of Defense.
Who are you?
You're Kurt Borton's father, is that right?
Yeah, you got information about him?
No, we have no information we can give you, but we do have a letter we need you to sign for us.
Well, what's this about?
Well, basically, it changes his status from missing in action to killed.
What do you mean
You
killed?
want to know for my son's own personal safety, I declare him dead. I said, no, I won't do that. They told me I'd get a large sum of money, and I said, I'm not concerned about the money of my boy. And I told them, no, I would not.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm not signing any letter. Now, just stay away from me, okay?
They got in the car and left. And they said, do not tell nobody about it. And so I didn't even tell her about it.
We don't work that way. We do things in a very professional manner. We would not approach someone and solicit them to change their son's status in a public parking lot of a shopping mall. It would have been done in uniform in the family's home and would not have been solicited to have that done.
I feel like I should talk to a lawyer before I sign this.
Robert claims that the 2 men pursued him aggressively over a period of weeks, always confronting him in a public place. Robert is functionally illiterate, and eventually he signed the document without knowing what it said.
And so I agreed to declare him dead for his own safety. They kept saying that every once in a while, for his own safety.
Right.
They never told me that he was alive, anything like that, but when they told me for his own safety, and then I knew he was alive then.
In the end, Robert Borton received a check for $43,000. 10 years went by before Robert told his family anything about the episode. When Diane read the letter that her father had signed, she discovered that it was not a waiver, but was typed up as a request by Mr. Borton. The description "killed in action" had been X'd out and replaced with "killed in captivity." It was one more confusing discovery that made the Bortons wonder what had really happened to Kurt. That confusion would grow as the family traveled, time and time again, to Washington, D.C. to investigate Kurt's case.
This file since the time you saw it last.
On several occasions, the Bortons were allowed to examine Kurt's official files.
During the early morning hours of an unrecalled day in March or April 1966.
What?
Diane claims that the entries regarding Kurt's death kept changing.
Some of these reports are unsubstantiated at the moment.
They had him killed in March or April of '66. In 1967, they have a story of him being with an engineer crew and being killed. They had him killed on paper several times. And it just amazes me that the audacity of them thinking that we would swallow each one of these stories and not say anything about it.
I think a lot of what the families read, they have to understand that what they're reading is not often government position, but it may be the report of a witness. These people, Vietnam villagers, are remembering things that happened to them 25 years ago during a traumatic time in their own lives. So there are often errors in years, there are often errors in months. Many times they only understand things from the cycles of planting and harvesting their crops.
The Bortons continued to dig for evidence that Kurt was still alive. In the process, the family believes that someone was becoming increasingly curious about them.
Every time I go and check out his file, there's something new.
Like what?
Well, this time I went and... Did you hear that?
Yeah, it's probably your call waiting.
I don't have call waiting.
Diane and other family members became convinced that their phones were tapped.
I started having several phone conversations with Diane, and she was giving me a lot of the information that she had.
One of Diane's cousins is certain that the entire family was being watched. He has asked that his identity not be revealed.
About that time frame that I started noticing that I was being followed to work. We lived in a house that was inside of a trailer park, and I had started noticing that pretty much every morning there would be a car pull out of the office parking lot, and they would follow me into work, and then I'd find them behind me again on my way home. After about a month and a half, maybe 2 months of being followed, I approached the two gentlemen in the car.
Yeah, guys, I'm not going to the company this morning. I'm going to the gym first. It's right across the street from the company. I'll be there for 2 hours. I'll be back here, take a shower, then I'm going back to work, okay?
What are you talking about?
You guys have been following me for a while. I figured I'd let you know where I was, just in case.
After that, for about a month and a half, 2 months, I wasn't followed anymore.
Have a nice day,
And then we started noticing them again.
As part of his job in a security company, Diane's cousin often ran routine credit checks. At Diane's request, he entered Kurt's social security number in the system and made an unsettling discovery.
I entered it into the computer, and it came back invalid entry. At that time, I went and got my employer, and I told him, I'm trying to run this credit application, and I think I'm doing something wrong. And he said, whoever filled out that credit application is trying to feed you a line. That number's never been issued. That same day, I had left work, was headed home, and I was approached by someone. They very pleasantly called me by my name.
Hi, how you doing?
Listen, what you did today was really stupid.
What are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about. That would be in you and your family's best interest not to do it again.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do. Now leave it alone.
Diane's cousin believes that he was threatened because he had stumbled upon evidence that Kurt might still be alive.
It would seem to fit together that maybe he had been used for covert operations, and in order to keep him from talking about these covert operations, he was given a new identity and instructions not to contact anyone from his past.
In 1990, a full 24 years after Kurt Borton supposedly died in Vietnam, his sister Diane moved to a suburb of Washington, D.C. Soon after, Diane had a chance encounter that finally convinced her that all of the scenarios about her brother might in fact be true.
I went down to gas up the van, and a car pulled in behind me. It was a red car. And whoever it was, you know, they must pump their gas fast because I see him run across and pay for theirs, and I walked across to pay for mine. And when I came back across, the person was standing there outside his car.
It looks like it's going to snow, doesn't it?
I was stunned. It was my brother. And I didn't even have time to react because as soon as he said that, he got in and took off. There was a real pretty girl in the front seat. She had long blonde hair. It didn't look like it was going to snow. It was October. It was clear skies. And that's the only thing he said to me.
The next April, Diane claims she saw Kurt again.
We were headed down 395, and a red car pulled up beside us. I looked over, and it was my brother.
That's Kurt.
It was the same red car I'd seen at the gas station. The blonde girl was in the car with him. You could see her, and he looked at me and he grinned. And then he took and shot in front of us and like slowed down a little bit. And I wrote down the license number. And then he sped up and zipped over in the other lane and zipped off the exit, that was at Quantico Marine Station. And we were going too fast, we couldn't follow him.
Diane traced the license plate number to a man who lived in Virginia, but he claimed to know nothing about Kurt. A few months later, in July of 1991, Diane says Kurt made another mysterious appearance. By this time, Diane says that at least one war buddy of Kurt's had confirmed that Kurt was alive. However, that vet said Kurt had come home a disturbed and dangerous man.
I spent many, many hours down at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I had my 2 daughters with me, and there's a little hill with some woods, and on the other side is the restrooms. We went over to the restroom, went in, used the restroom. When we came out of the restroom, my brother was leaning against the wall. And my oldest daughter, she recognized him.
Mom, that's Kurt.
Come on,
Mom,
let's
he's
go.
right there.
Let's go home.
Mom, please talk to him.
I had been told from other sources that he was potentially dangerous. I had my 2 children with me, and I just couldn't take that chance that he could possibly be dangerous and harm my children. I know now that was a mistake. And if I had it all to do over again, I would have turned around, I would have faced him, I would have talked to him, I would have threw my arms around him and hugged him. But I was afraid.
In 1992, another disturbing event.
Hello?
Is this Robert Borton?
Yes, who's this?
I can't mention any names. No names.
The caller asked a question which could only be answered by 2 people.
Your son had a blonde-haired babysitter. What was her name?
Frida Smith.
Frida Smith.
Yeah! Is that my son? Is he there?
So I knew right then it's him, but he must be in the background. And then they made a statement they'd be seeing me soon.
I can't tell you anything more, but he'll be seeing you soon. Don't tell anyone.
Wait, hello? Hello?
And I hadn't heard another word from him. I figured he'd probably get in touch, but I haven't heard no more, and I hope I didn't jeopardize his life or anything but tell anybody.
In August of 1993, the Bortons were notified that a new set of documents concerning MIAs and POWs had been declassified by the government. When they met with officials at Marine headquarters, the Bortons were shocked by what they learned.
We have discovered some remains that we believe belong to Kurt.
What did you find?
We found 11 teeth in a gravesite.
Where did you find them?
One report told of 4 U.S. soldiers who were killed by the Viet Cong in 1966. Vietnamese eyewitnesses said that the bodies were buried and then later moved to another gravesite. Although the actual dates are in dispute, the government believed that the discovery of Kurt's teeth and another set of dog tags at the gravesite provided reasonable certainty that Kurt was killed in Vietnam. However, the teeth found in the grave were compared with x-rays provided by the military, not by Kurt's family.
I asked him, I says, where's the rest of his body? All he have is teeth. They says, well, there was grave robbers, and they came and they robbed the grave and took the body. And I'm thinking, well, this is kind of dumb. What, did they just leave the teeth?
We know that there is remains trade in Vietnam, where remains are buried, dug up and moved to another place, dug up again, and sold to remains traders. So they miss many of the smaller pieces. So often we find only teeth. Forensic experts tell us that these teeth were from a deceased person, and that the teeth do match Robert Borton.
It looks like it's going to snow, doesn't it?
Today, the Borton family believes that Kurt is part of a secret government operation. Diane, in particular, feels that her brother has attempted to contact the family in order to let them know that he is alive, without endangering himself by exposing his new identity.
I talked to a man who claims to be a secret returnee. He said that they were allowed to come back as long as they didn't contact their families or let anybody know they're back. The official status that was taken on these men was that there were no more live POWs in Southeast Asia. And they couldn't bring back live POWs when they've already taken the stand that all the POWs are home or dead.
There's no such program to bring servicemen back after Vietnam and give them new identities. Robert Borton would not be a candidate for any type of secret mission. He was a very young man. He was in the Marine Corps just over 6 months. He did not have any special skills. He did not have a security clearance or any linguistic skills that would have been needed for some type of a covert operation.
They're lying to us, and there's lots of families out there like us that are suffering because of it. And that's what's hard for me to handle, is knowing what I've went through and knowing there's other families out there going through the same thing, the not knowing.
What happened to Kurt Borton? Did he die in the jungles of Vietnam, as the government says, or did he somehow manage to survive? Despite the official record, the Borton family remains convinced that Kurt is very much alive and that one day he will come home. Recently, we told you the story of Soon Van Nguyen, who immigrated to America from Vietnam with his family in 1993. Soon had come not only to start a new life, but to complete a chapter from his old one. In 1968, at the height of the Vietnam War, Soon was among hundreds of South Vietnamese officers dispatched to a U.S. Air Force base in Louisiana for jet pilot training. Within weeks, Soon had fallen in love with an American woman named Gwendolyn Lofton. But inevitably, the war intervened. Soon was sent back to Vietnam to fight for his country. A few months after his return, he received a letter from America. Gwendolyn was pregnant.
I'm gonna be the father. Hey, do that, yeah? Do that, yeah? Do that, yeah!
Coming back from a tense mission and hearing the good news, I was so happy at that moment.
5 years later, Soon was dispatched to Louisiana once again. He met his daughter Kimberly for the first time.
And I looked at her and knew right away that this was my child.
Kimberly, this is Sue.
Soon?
Soon was able to spend an entire month with Kimberly before he had to return to Vietnam and the war. After the war ended, Soon was incarcerated for nearly 10 years in a re-education camp. Another 10 years passed before he finally made it to America. But Soon never stopped thinking of the little girl he had left behind so long ago. And on our broadcast, he asked if someone in our audience could help reunite them. That night, the switchboard at our phone center lit up with calls from Kimberly's friends and family. Kimberly, who lives in Pineville, Louisiana, was thrilled to learn that Soon was looking for her. Over the years, Kimberly had searched for Soon, but had always run into dead ends. Now she was anxious to be with her father again. A few days later, Soon and his American sponsor traveled to Louisiana for an emotional reunion with Kimberly. It was their first time together in more than 20 years.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh, good to see you.
Soon was overcome with emotion. Still, he wanted to convey his feelings in English.
When in Vietnam, I never think I can meet her. But now it's my dream can be true. I very, very happy.
Sure. And then we hugged, and then we said hello, and then it was just, you can't describe the feeling. It was just like, nice. It doesn't do the feeling justice, but it was just incredible, fantastic, wonderful, great.
Later that day, Soon celebrated with 20 members of Kimberly's family, including her mother, Gwendolyn.
What kind of topping? I said she likes pineapple. To see them together is just a dream come true. I'm telling you. A fairy tale that had some bad detours, but it came to a happy ending.
Oh, this is a big day, a happy day. I think I cannot forget it.
That's not fair. Okay, then I will answer. I knew that wherever he was, that he loved me. And I was always certain in my heart that one day we would be back together.
We want to go to Prague to enjoy, and I love it. I love it.
For Soon and Kimberly, the end of their long search marked the beginning of a new life for both of them. On our next Unsolved Mysteries, for more than 60 years, a mysterious light has appeared above a stretch of railroad tracks in Arkansas. Some say there is a scientific explanation. Others believe the light is nothing less than the ghost of a murdered railroad foreman, perhaps still searching for his killer. And the final appeal of Stuart Heaton. DNA tests were the primary evidence that convicted him of a murder he swears he did not commit. But how accurate were the tests? Heaton may spend the rest of his life behind bars waiting to find out. Join me next Friday for another intriguing edition of Unsolved Mysteries.